Unleash the roar. Singapore unveils an ambitious plan to qualify for the World Cup in 2034.
Connect at Changi has checked in its very first guest, a business traveller from France who's staying for 5 nights.
Jamie Teo has been fined $65,000 for not preventing the underpaying of foreign workers at 12 Cupcakes. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Hey, if you have boys in primary school now, they could be part of the Singapore team bidding to qualify for the 2034 World Cup. That's one of the aims anyway of Goal 2034, which is a blueprint to strengthen our local football ecosystem.
The Football Association of Singapore and Sport Singapore today announced details of the Unleash the Roar project with an emphasis on 8 pillars. They include a standardized football curriculum for primary schools, football academies in secondary schools, local and foreign scholarships, as well as national service concessions.
So under this project, the overarching strategy is to create opportunities for more young Singaporeans to have sustained and structured high-quality football training. Plus, there will be a clear talent pathway for those who wish to continue to play and excel as a professional.
But Sport SG CEO Lim Teck Yin said the first step to ensure the project's success is to convince parents.
Actually, the first people we're trying to convince are the parents, because they really make the decision as to whether their children are actively participating in sport, and if they are, whether they want to choose football. When we launched the ActiveSG Football Academy in 2016, we did not imagine that it would grow so quickly to spread across the island. The desire to play among the children is high. And I think what we are trying to offer parents is a good quality sport program, football program in this case, that will develop, be part of their children's more holistic development, together with their academics. And there is a pathway and a structure and a system that will be in place that the parents can understand and see what opportunities exist for their children.
The project will have a phased approach, with the first phase taking place in these 2 years to put in place the right conditions for footballers to excel in both software and hardware aspects. This will lay the foundation for Singapore's football teams across age groups to be more competitive on the regional and international stages.
FAS Vice President Bernard Tan said that despite our smaller stature, Singaporeans have the potential to play in international teams.
I sat down one time to ask myself, are Singaporeans genetically ill-disposed to play football? I mean, I really have to understand the question, right? Because if you say, why we even bother to try? I used to think that maybe, you need a giant, right, to actually play football at top level. I always say, Mo Salah is my height. He's just 20 kgs lighter than me, right? Philippe Coutinho is shorter than I am, right? They're playing top-class football. And the development of the game has actually enabled agility as well as technical ability to trump size. This is good news for us Asians, right? So there must be a way in which Singaporeans can develop and play football at the highest level. It is within our reach. I believe that.
Meanwhile, the postponed National School Games, originally slated to start last month, will resume from March 29th. But only A, B and Senior Division competitions for 12 of the 29 sports will proceed because they are, quote, non-contact sports with limited contact and intermingling between participants. The C and Junior Divisions are expected to resume in Term 3, which starts on June 28th.
The 12 sports include badminton, bowling, golf and tennis. The other 17, like swimming, football, basketball and hockey, will remain suspended for now.
6 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed today, all imported. Now they have been placed on stay-home notice when they arrived here. The Health Ministry will share more details later tonight.
Well, Connect at Changi welcomed its first batch of overseas guests yesterday. Among the first to check in was a business traveller who flew in from France for a 5-day stay. Opened last month, the dedicated facility allows business travellers to stay and meet their Singapore-based counterparts without having to serve quarantine upon arrival. Other confirmed guests who will be arriving include business travellers from Germany, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia and the UAE.
Artist Jamie Teo was fined $65,000 today for failing to prevent her company 12 Cupcakes from underpaying its foreign workers between 2013 and 2016. She had pleaded guilty to 10 charges under the Employment of Foreign Manpower Act. 14 other charges were taken into consideration during sentencing.
2 days from now, on Thursday, China's parliament is expected to approve a resolution that will drastically reduce democratic representation in Hong Kong's electoral system and vet any candidates for, quote, patriotism.
This is Hong Kong's current electoral system. The city has a population of about 7.5 million people, but its leader is elected by a committee of 1,200 members. They're from 4 sectors: business, professional, social and political, with 300 members from each. A new sector of 300 members is expected to be added to the committee.
Now, details are still unclear, but Beijing's proposed measures will change the size and composition of Hong Kong's legislature in the Electoral Committee selecting the chief executive, further in favor of pro-Beijing figures. Keep in mind as well that the committee is set to elect Hong Kong's next leader next year.
Here to share more is the Straits Times' China correspondent Elizabeth Law, who joins us from Beijing. Elizabeth, a Deputy Commissioner of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Hong Kong, said the proposed changes were needed to, quote, close obvious loopholes and deficiencies in Hong Kong's political system. What is he referring to? What loopholes and deficiencies?
Well, so the whole idea that there are loopholes and that they have to refine the system, this is something that has been repeated often by officials in Beijing, as well as senior officials in Hong Kong, when they were trying to push this forward to propose these changes. So essentially what they feel were loopholes is that there were members of the legislature, which is the Legislative Council, where people were being voted, the voted lawmakers. They felt that some of them were not patriotic in the sense that they wanted to reform parts of Hong Kong. They wanted to have open democracy, universal suffrage, and at times I think a lot of them were alluding to the protests that we saw in 2019, that sort of thing. And they feel like whatever happened was the result of people who were unpatriotic, because to them, loving Hong Kong and loving the motherland, which is Beijing, have to be the exact same thing. And that if you want to love Hong Kong, you have to love China as well. And that you cannot do anything that is against what Beijing wants. So essentially that is what they're saying, that they want to close these sort of loopholes. But just to go back a little bit, I mean, we have seen a lot of reports about what would be changed about the Electoral Commission, but we aren't exactly sure yet, because what is going to be passed later this week, well, it's still being discussed in Chinese Parliament now, is essentially just a proposal for the changes. But exactly what happens, that will need to go back to the Basic Law Committee on the National People's Congress Basic Law Committee, and then it needs to go through the Standing Committee before we even have an idea of what is going to come.
Right. On that note, Liz, a new sector of 300 members is expected to be added to Hong Kong's election committee, taking the total number of seats from 1,200 to 1,500. Who will be these new members, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, to go back to what I said earlier, basically what has been proposed now is just that there will be changes, which is what was submitted to the National People's Congress last week. But exactly what these changes are going to be, how is the Electoral Committee going to be reconfigured? All of that we still don't know. We have no details yet, because the process now is that after the proposal is being voted on Thursday, then what is likely to happen is that this proposal will now go to the Basic Law Committee of the National People's Congress, where the details will now be worked out. And then the details will be worked out, and then there's supposed to be a period of consultation, and then it will go back to the National People's Congress Standing Committee, which is essentially the lawmaking body of the Chinese parliament. Then they will pass it. And if we base this on the timeline of the national security law that was being passed last year, I think the earliest that we could have more details about what is actually in this, the exact numbers of the Electoral Commission, the makeup of it. I think the earliest that we would know would be 2 to 3 months' time.
Liz, let's talk about how this will affect Singapore, if there are any implications with China having more control over Hong Kong, if these electoral changes are approved. Will we see international companies or investments moving out of the city and possibly to Singapore?
Well, this has been a theme that a lot have been talking about ever since the protests and the unrest in 2019. People felt that, Beijing was starting to have more control, and really Beijing's reach was starting to creep in Hong Kong. We've seen a lot of reports from various news outlets as well, suggesting that the move was something that was a little bit more subtle. They weren't being very open about it. It was because at the end of the day, both Singapore and Hong Kong play similar yet distinct roles in Asia for multinational corporations. For Hong Kong, it allows people and companies access to the Chinese market, which is still, let's not forget, is still the world's second largest economy. It is a very, very important market in the world. But of course, people do see Singapore as a place where there is more stability. And of course, we do have a fairly well-established financial system as well. So I would say that, and there aren't any hard figures on companies that have made the shift, and it's all a lot of anecdotal evidence. So I would say that is something that I wouldn't be able to give you a definite answer on.
Right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Elizabeth. We've been speaking with our China correspondent, Elizabeth Law.
In other global headlines, hundreds of young Myanmar protesters were trapped overnight by security forces in a district of Yangon were finally able to get out, following international calls for them to be allowed to leave. Several embassies, including the US and UK, had tweeted late yesterday warning that security forces had surrounded a group of young people in the Sanchong neighborhood of Yangon. Thousands in Yangon had also defied a nighttime curfew to take to the streets in support of these youths.
Australians who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 will have to declare where they were born and what language they speak at home. This data collected will then be used to identify communities where vaccine uptake is lowest, allowing the government to channel culturally specific campaigns about the safety and efficacy of vaccines. Since late last year, similar data has been collected from every Australian who's tested positive for COVID-19.
US visa applicants who were denied entry under Donald Trump's travel ban can now reapply. The ban had barred the entry of applicants from 13 mostly Muslim majority and African countries. Those who applied after January 20th last year can now seek reconsideration without resubmitting their applications and paying additional fees.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.